Hi, and welcome to the Why Eating Healthy is Not Enough Summit. I'm Linda Mechner, your host, and today I am here with Gillian Hood. Gillian, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Like you said, I'm Gillian Hood, and I am a coach that works with women who are sick and tired of essentially being sick and tired. That's kind of cliche, but it's true. Sick and tired of chronic dieting, overeating, emotional eating, gaining weight, losing weight only to gain more, and the whole vicious cycle. And I help them get off of that cycle, make peace with food in their bodies, and get on with living life.
Very cool. You know, you shared something that I just found so interesting before, and that is that the way you work, there's no food rules. It's like outside of diet, outside of all of the constraints that we're used to thinking of, what healthy is and what it isn't. And I'd love for you to maybe talk a little bit more about that and share your perspective on how, a better way to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of disturbing for some people when they first hear that. What do you mean no food rules? They'll say, I need you to tell me what to eat or how to eat or when to eat or why to eat or all of those things. And I don't do that. I think that most of us could write the book on the rules. Maybe everyone's would be a little bit different because there's so many different sets of rules out there and they're all crazy making. But the truth is that we were born with our own internal knowing of when it's time to eat, when we're hungry, and when we're done eating, and whether we even have some knowing of what we really want or what our body's asking for. And it's something that we lose as we get older. Most people, not everybody. If you know someone who can eat whatever they want and they eat as much as they want and they're not obsessed with food or with, they're not telling you what new diet they're on every other day, and they maintain their weight and they just don't have food and body issues. These are people that were not undone, didn't have any of that undone. There are rare people, but there are some. So what happens is, as we're growing up, our families have food rules that are passed down or that are learned, or we get them from doctors or whatever. And so babies are put on a feeding schedule instead of eating when they really want to, even though they know when it's time to eat, and because it's when they cry, and then when they're done, and you can't get them to finish the bottle or eat all the food on the plate or whatever. But as we get older, we're supposed to eat all the food on the plate because of the starving children in China, India, wherever it is these days, everywhere, or because food costs money, or I worked hard for that, or I made that for you, or whatever the reasons, or you can't have dessert without eating all your dinner. And that's just one example of why we get all of this internal knowledge just goes away. And then as we get older, we start obsessing over our bodies, and we live in a culture where thin is in, and there's no other way that people are allowed to be, if you listen to the general consensus of our culture. And so we become obsessed with being thin, and that requires not being in touch with your body. That requires completely disconnecting and following some diet or some guru or some plan or some whatever. And there you have foods that you can eat, foods you can't eat. And this creates what's called diet deprivation backlash. So if you ever wondered why every time you try to be good, in quotes, you end up overeating, that's called diet deprivation backlash. And it doesn't matter if you're on an official diet or not. So external rules don't work. They don't help. And anyone who's been on successive diets and has gained all the weight back plus more knows this all too well. But most people don't know what else to do, and they don't know there's an alternative. And that's what I teach people, because I've been there and I've done that. And we can learn to trust our own bodies, and our bodies will guide us most of the time in what they want to eat, when they're ready to eat, how much they want, when they're done, when you're satisfied. All of those things can be relearned, and it makes for pleasurable eating, what a concept, as well as getting on with the rest of your day and doing everything else without your day revolving around food or thinking about when you're going to eat again or all the things you can't eat, all the craziness that goes along with diet culture.
Right. So how do you help people who have specific health concerns or health challenges? How do they navigate things like, how would a diabetic navigate sugar, or somebody who's gluten intolerant navigate gluten? Like, how do you help people make those decisions, or how do you coach them to tune in a way that protects their health, but also helps them tune in better?
Right. Well, there's a lot to that, but I'll give you my basic approach. Um, so in my approach, you stop dieting, period. And that includes any kind of plan that you're on, like, I'm just going to eat healthy. That means that there's foods you can eat and foods you can't eat. And whenever you have foods you can't eat, those are the foods generally you're going to want. So that happens really even more stringently when it comes to a health condition. The doctor says, stop eating sugar, or stop eating white flour, or whatever, or don't eat, red meat, or whatever it is. And of course, that's all we think about and dream about and want to eat. So allowing all foods to be legal and knowing that you can have all foods, and that's a process that takes a while. But making everything legal, everything comes out on an even playing field. And it's so much easier to make choices that, maybe it's food that you want mentally, but you also might want it physically. And you start making more choices based on what physically feels good. So as far as, let's say diabetes, for example, for a diabetic, my approach is, now, of course, with diabetic or any kind of health condition, you work as a team. So it's not just my rules and that's it. And I don't have any rules, so it doesn't matter. But I do work within the scope of, the doctor's recommendations and all of that. What I want to do is avoid any kind of deprivation, because I know that it's just going to backfire. So all food is legal. But as you start eating based on what you want, eating based on hunger and fullness, physical hunger and fullness, not emotional, or because it's there or whatever, or I'm not going to eat in 2 hours, so I better eat now, just basic hunger and fullness. Eventually, the reason why this approach works is because you start to feel good. When I was binging, I was a binge eater from the age of 8. And it got to the point where I could binge anyone under the table. I mean, I could eat. And I didn't realize how sick I felt after I ate every single freaking time. And when I started eating for hunger and then for fullness, what a concept. I felt good when I was done. I had energy ready to move on to the next thing in my day. And that feels so good that it's easy to maintain. I can no longer overeat. I can eat a little bit above full, but I cannot go where I used to go. My body stops me, let alone my
Mm-hmm.
mind. I just can't do it. It's really quite surprising, but that's been the case for years now. So knowing that all food is legal and you're eating to feel good physically and mentally, what I do is I use 3 food groups. And these aren't like the 4 food groups that many of us grew up with. It's not like the food pyramid or the food plate or any of that stuff. And food plate's probably the most moderate of all of those ridiculous things, but it's still ridiculous. So basically, I have 3 food groups. Foods you love is 1. Foods you don't like is number 2. And foods that don't honor you is number 3. So number 1, foods you love, this could be anything. I don't care how bad it is. Like years ago, fettuccine Alfredo was called heart attack on a plate. Like you're going to eat it and die, right? Come on. So if you love fettuccine Alfredo, it goes in group number 1. If you love sugar, okay, it goes in group number 1. That's fine. So don't leave me yet, because stick with me. It gets better. Group number 2 are the foods you don't like. And so I had a friend who hated, what was it, chicken and asparagus, which I think are both wonderful. But those are, typical diet foods, or asparagus, or maybe broccoli and chicken, is your typical diet food. But that was something that's, to me, that's an easy meal. but she hated it. And so that would go in group number 2. I don't like beets, and beets are like the superfood of superfoods, if there is such a thing, which I think superfoods are a stupid concept too. But it does have a lot of great vitamins and minerals, and it's beautiful color. It's got carotenoids and all that stuff. I hate beets, so I won't eat them, no matter how good they are for me. You could not convince me to do it. There's no way. So that's foods you don't like. And then the foods that don't honor you is really the most important group, and where I'm headed in my point here. Foods that don't honor you are foods that don't make you feel good when you eat them. Or they might be foods that can lead to not feeling good down the road, including your health. So for a diabetic, you might think that sugar, well, I used to think I was addicted to sugar, and food addiction is a whole other concept that is really not a useful concept, including with sugar. Sugar is not more addictive than heroin. I don't care what people say, it's not true. So anyway, I mean, if you look at the dopamine spikes in the brain, heroin, up here, sugar, it's not more addictive. Anyway, it's not addictive at all. Maybe our thoughts about it are, and our desire for it, but sugar's not addictive. So anyway, but it is harmful for diabetics to eat a whole lot of it. Well, when I thought I was addicted to sugar, I thought I had to cut it completely out. And what I eventually learned was I could have a certain amount, because I would eat sugar and I would just eat, candy or whatever it was until I got sick and I had to sleep it off. I went into a food coma, basically, where I literally had to sleep it off because I was so sick. So I learned I can have a certain amount of sugar and be just fine and feel good, and it doesn't mess with me. But if I eat beyond that, then yeah, that's a problem. So foods that don't honor you are either a food that absolutely doesn't work for you. Like for me, it's raw onions. For some reason, about 10 years ago, I started not being able to eat them. They make me doubled over in pain. So as much as I like them, I don't eat them because I don't like to feel that way. So that's a pretty simple one. There's people who go into anaphylactic shock if they eat seafood or something. Obviously, they're not going to eat those foods, and that's in group 3. But the other part of group 3 is the foods that only a certain amount works for you, but not more than that. And so that works for diabetics. That works for people with heart disease and with stroke and whatever. If they have to limit a certain food, no one has ever said, well, maybe they do, if they don't mean cut it out completely. Because, it's just like toxicologists talk about, like, poisons. Nothing is poisonous until it reaches a certain limit. And the same thing is with food. It's the dose that matters, not the substance. And of course, some substances are more poisonous than others, and you don't need as much, like I don't know, botulism. But if I'm trying to think of something that you can eat a little bit of, like cyanide. There's, I think, cyanide in apricot pits or something.
Apple seeds.
Yeah. And so we can eat a little bit of that stuff, and it shows up in our body, in our fluids, our tissue or whatever. But if we eat a lot, yeah, it's going to kill us. Same thing with sugar, same thing with white flour, same thing with gluten in most cases. Now, someone who's celiac, gluten's out. Gluten is, number 3, it's in group 3, but it's something they absolutely do not eat because the consequences are not fun and not worth it. But anyway, so, if you're a diabetic, you probably know that you can get away with eating some sugar because most diabetics do. And some
Right.
may end up getting sicker because they eat so much because they're trying to restrict it so much and they're trying to not eat it. Where if you allow yourself to have some, it's not that big of a deal. Now, I'm just making a generalization. This is not specific advice for anybody who's watching this. But the point is, when you try to cut something out completely, and it's because you think it's bad for you or you shouldn't have it or whatever the case is, be more reasonable and think about food group number 3, where maybe a little bit will honor you, but a lot won't. And it'll make you feel sick. And the whole point of eating, which I didn't know this for years, even though it makes sense, the whole point of eating is to feel better when you're done.
Interesting.
Right?
So when people try to, or they make the switch from following diets and food rules to doing an intuitive eating strategy,
Mhm.
how long does it take them to get to a point where they are, I don't want to say not out of control, but for a
Mhm.
lot of people, if you took all the rules off the table, it would be game on,
Right.
sugar, all of the things that, eh, and I know a lot of people would be terrified that they are going to gain 50 pounds in
Yep.
a month because that's what's they've been suppressing and keeping in check. So how does that work for people? Is it usually not as bad as they think, or is there like a gain and then a decrease?
Both of those could happen. It's different for everybody, but most people assume they're going to go crazy and they're not going to be able to stop. And I've had plenty of clients, and I did it myself, where you eat a whole bunch because you got to get it out of your system. Your brain, your subconscious needs to know that you can have that food today, tomorrow, a year from now, whenever you want it. And so sometimes you've got to eat it whenever you want it, so you can convince your subconscious, because it doesn't believe you when you say, oh, I can have whatever I want. It's like, no, you have all these rules. And we've all played games with ourselves, well, if I want this tomorrow, I'll really have it, but we know we're not going to want it tomorrow. So we're really not giving ourselves full permission. We're just playing a game with our minds. Um, so you really have to give yourself permission. So sometimes, yes, that can result in a weight gain. But when you're doing this, I don't want to say properly because there are no rules with intuitive eating, but if you're really following the guidelines and you're remembering that there is life beyond full permission with food, like that's step 2. And step 3 is learning hunger and learning fullness and learning satisfaction and starting to eat within those no, I don't know what word to use. I'm trying to be careful here. Um, those feelings, okay? Those physical feelings, those physical cues. There you go. And with intuitive eating, you don't have to eat only when you're hungry and stop always when you're full, because that's the intuitive eating diet. Once again, there are rules if you do that. So it's most of the time you're eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full because it feels good. Food tastes better when you're hungry, and it feels good to stop when you're full. Um, but it does take some time to convince your subconscious that I can have that food whenever I want it, because it's been off limits for years. And all I've done is either binged or completely avoided it. So that does happen. The other thing, so for some people, they'll say, like, I remember a story of a colleague of mine. She had this guy who said, I eat meat and potatoes every night for dinner, and I have to have it, but I can't have it because I have heart disease or something, right? And so he's always dieting. And so he had this whole diet, mentality thing going on, and this yo-yo diet thing going on. And so when he had the concept of full permission, he's like, well, I'll never stop eating meat and potatoes. Well, as soon as he got full permission after the 4th night, he was sick of it. And it's a real thing. It's called habituation, and we get tired of it. Our taste buds get tired of it. I mean, our taste buds habituate to food even as we're eating it. And as we get closer to full, the food doesn't taste as good. But most of us aren't paying any attention to this. We're either shoveling it in or doing something else while we're eating, or pretending like, I'm really not eating this. I'm eating it, but I'm not watching myself eat it. Trying to be mindless about it so that you can have it, but not have accountability for it, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
It's all craziness, but we all do it. So anyway, it does take time, but the most important thing to remember is that there is life beyond full permission. You always have full permission for the rest of your life, but when you start to work with your body, you're going to have these parameters that feel really good, and you're going to want to maintain them. But it can take time. It can take, a month or 2 sometimes for this. But if you're working with someone who knows what they're doing, or you're following the guidelines and you're really paying attention to the whole picture of what happens after each step, then you're not going to gain 50 pounds. And I've seen blog posts about this. I've seen people swear up and down, I gain 100 pounds on intuitive eating. It's like, well, you weren't doing intuitive eating then. Because we are all born as intuitive eaters, and little babies don't gain 100 pounds, because they overeat. You cannot overfeed a baby until you start messing with its head, of course.
Yeah.
When they're first born, you cannot overfeed a baby.
It reminds me of this experience I had when my oldest child was a baby, and he was a fat little baby, and he was just nursing. He didn't have baby food, he didn't have formula, he was just nursing the way a baby's supposed to.
Right.
And this older woman came up to me, and people come up and coo at babies and they smile and say hi. And this older woman came up and she looked at him and she said, "Oh my God, he's so fat. You better stop feeding him so much or he's going to turn out to be really fat."
Oh.
And, at the time I thought, there's no way. He's a baby. He's nursing. That's what babies do. You want babies to be well nourished and
That's
fat.
right.
And of course, as soon as he got beyond a certain point, he was no longer roly-poly. He was
Right.
normal. And, he's never, ever had a weight issue. He
Yeah.
doesn't overeat. I mean, he just, he would never dream of overeating.
The more we can leave kids alone, and like there's a wonderful, is she a dietitian? I'm not sure if she's a therapist. Anyway, her name is Ellen Satter, and she's an expert on feeding children. And she's got a great book called How to Get Your Kid to Eat, But Not Too Much. And it's about helping parents work with their kids to get them to be normal eaters so they don't develop any kind of disordered eating or eating disorder, but without all of the fighting and all the craziness and all the rules and all the hovering and all of that makes things more difficult. And her whole point is, as the parent, you decide what comes in the house, but you let your kid decide how much and when. And I love that. That's beautiful. And she doesn't have anything against family meals or anything like that. But, when we start telling kids that's bad for you, or, that kind of thing, some people use the term play food, which I'm kind of on the fence about. I kind of like it, but I kind of don't. I think it depends on the kid, but having foods that are good and bad, you are ultimately going to have a problem. I mean, I didn't have lots of food restriction. But I had lots of rules, which is what really got my eating disorder going. And because I rebelled against them. I mean, I didn't know I was doing that, but it's what I did. And that's what we just do naturally all through our lives. And it becomes a real problem. And I can't stand when people talk about other people's bodies. Drives me crazy, especially to their face. What is that? Why do we think that's okay? I mean, I know it's our culture, but it's so wrong.
Yeah.
Somebody said that about my kid. I don't know. I'd be pretty pissed.
Yeah, I was really, shocked and appalled when it happened. But I mean, as a health coach, it really is, it's one of those things where people think that I'm really tuned into people's weights and people's body, because a lot of people come because they want to lose weight and they want to be healthy. And, I think that, being healthy is important. Being, connected to creating the life that you want is important. But ultimately, the number on the scale doesn't matter one iota. And people think it's weird when I say I don't care what somebody weighs, but it's not my business. I'm just there to help people create what they want. That's right. That's my only job.
That's right. Yeah. And we definitely live in a culture where people think that people should want something, or they should this, or they should that. And in the health at every size movement, which I am a part of, where we know that people of varying sizes, because everyone is genetically different, no one can fit perfectly on the BMI. I hate the BMI. Anyway, in that movement, where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought.
Health at every size.
What did you say before that?
What somebody weighs is none of my business.
Oh yeah. So that just creates more shame. People shame themselves enough. And so, it's true. And I know what I was going to say. So even the idea that we should all be pursuing health is kind of, it's kind of disturbing when you pull back and think about it, because not everybody can, and there's a social justice piece to health at every size that says, if health isn't the number one thing on your list, that's okay. That is your decision. No one should be saying you should be doing this and you should be doing that, because some people, they can barely do enough just to get food on the table. They're so busy trying to work and make money to feed their kids or whatever, that I think we have to be really careful in making these assumptions about what people should be doing. And I wish people would just, focus on themselves and leave everyone else alone.
Right, right.
Because we've all got our own issues to deal with. Let's just focus on that.
Yeah, for sure. Usually when people come into my world, it's because, they do have some desire and
Oh, of
inclinations
course.
around health
Of
and
course.
all of that.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, for other people, like I have friends that are all shapes and sizes, and I would
Mhm.
never dream of suggesting to them that they should do this or should do
Yeah.
that. I mean, if they ask me for my help or support, different, but
Right. Right.
otherwise, I don't care.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that something you said reminded me. I was doing a health screening this morning. I one of the things I do is I go into corporations with Kaiser Hospital, and we do health screens for employees. And I like doing it because I like to, give people their numbers and help them, with setting goals and all that kind of stuff. But we have to do BMI, which I hate. And this morning I had this guy, he's only 30, and his BMI was like 26.1. And he said, yeah, I've been working really hard trying to get my BMI down. And I said, why? And he said, because my doctor said I need to be a normal BMI. I'm like, I looked at him and said, we also did body fat, with the little thingies that you hold, which, how accurate are they? I don't know. But anyway, it said he was like, what was it, 17% body fat? And he's like, yeah, I'm cutting back on what I eat and I'm working out like crazy. I'm like, dude, stop.
Yeah.
Please stop. Don't get on the scale anymore. Stop worrying about BMI. Just eat, eat what you want, eat when you're hungry. Please eat more. and let it go, because he was a mess. He was mentally just like freaking out about it.
Yeah,
And
and
it's so wrong.
17% body fat. I mean, even for a guy, that is as low as what I think is aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
And
He
and
he looked thin for
yeah.
sure,
And I think people have ideas about where they should be. I mean, like you
Mhm.
said, and BMI, I think, is a piece of garbage. It
It
means
is.
nothing. All
That's
it's going to
right.
do is mess up your head. And even the body fat, people have an idea of what body fat should be, and it has
Mhm.
nothing to do with health. It has
That's
nothing
right.
to do with aesthetics. I mean, it's just this idea that they cling to beyond reason. And
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that they, men especially, they want to cut, they want to get down to
Right.
16, 13% body fat. And I'm like, uh,
Yeah.
yuck.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and what's that going to do for your life? Is that going to get you a raise and change your health that dramatically? No. I mean,
Right.
it's not going to do anything. It's just like losing weight. I keep telling people, you don't want to lose weight. I said, I get it. I get what you want, but you want what you think it can give you.
Right.
And can it really do that? No.
Right. Right.
How
And
many times have we all lost weight and we're like, oh, life still sucks?
yeah, and when you talk about getting into that low body fat, I mean, it's going to mess up your hormones. It's going to
Yeah.
mess up your brain chemistry. It's like there's so many negative side effects. It's just so not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's craziness. And that's what all of these numbers and stuff, what I enjoy about that work is more the blood numbers, because
Yeah.
they do the blood testing. And I think that's pretty important. And it's not something we can, easily test, going to the gym or whatever.
Right, right.
So I think that's pretty important, but, and also being able to, I mean, it's amazing how much people don't know about health,
Yeah.
that, 65 years old, and this woman this morning, and she didn't even understand what blood pressure was all about. It's like,
Oh my.
it's kind of important, you know.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
enjoy that part of it, but the BMI drives me insane. But I do slip little notes on their paperwork. Read health at every size. Read intuitive eating. And one of
There
these
you
days I'm gonna
go.
get in trouble. But
Right.
whatever.
Well,
But
good for
yeah.
you for doing that work and spreading the word. I mean, really, the sooner they throw out BMI, the better. I mean, I
I can't
think
tell you
more,
how many.
yeah,
Oh, I'm
more,
sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. I was going to say more than anything, that probably messes up the head
Yeah.
of young girls. They read BMI and they think that they're fat, and they're
Right.
not. They're just, they're just normal teenagers with the bodies
Hmm.
that that God gave them, and they
Yep.
start dieting, and from there, that's where it goes downhill. And if they never
Yes.
saw that BMI number that they didn't understand in the first place, they wouldn't have even gotten on that messed up road.
That's right. And dieting is the big problem. We do not have an obesity epidemic. We have a dieting and thin at all cost epidemic. It all starts, well, my eating disorder did not start with dieting, but it got worse with dieting. But for most people, it starts with dieting. And, and you mess up your metabolism and all kinds of other things. And you really mess with your head. And it
Yeah.
takes a lot of work to undo it. It's totally worth it, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming and being with us and sharing your amazing perspectives. I know this is going to be a mind bender for a lot of people. And do you want to share about your gift, your free gift?
Sure. So my free gift is it's a report called the 6 keys to make peace with food. There it is. Putting an end to binging, overeating, and breaking out of diet prison. And it's not the same old thing. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm not going to tell you, how to eat. I'm not going to give you behavior modification garbage. It starts with not dieting, of course, with ending dieting, but I talk about making sure you have fun in your life, and other things like that I think are going to be very different for people who have not been exposed to this message before. But listen to it, because it's coming. It's spreading. It's getting bigger, and more dietitians and doctors and other health professionals are getting on the bandwagon, and this is where it's going, and I can't wait.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you again so much. And I will see you all next time.
Thank
See you
you.
later. Bye.